He thought leaving her behind would destroy her, but she came back with the one thing he could never control: their twins. And when she walked into his wedding, everything he thought he owned shattered in an instant. Hi, my beautiful family. Stay with me till the very end of this story. I promise it's going to touch your heart. Like, comment, and share your love as we journey together. The soft glow of candlelight flickered across the elegant dining table in the Cole penthouse, throwing playful shadows on the walls. Aaliyah Brooks held the small pregnancy test in her hand, its two bright pink lines almost glowing in the dim light. After 3 years of marriage and 2 years of trying, she was finally pregnant. She could barely breathe, heart hammering in her chest as she imagined Ethan's face when he learned the news. She had planned everything perfectly. Ethan's favorite ribeye steaks were roasting in the oven, paired with a bottle of 1995 Bordeaux they had saved since their honeymoon. Rose petals had been carefully arranged in a heart shape around his place setting. Beside his plate, she had wrapped a tiny pair of baby shoes, a sweet and tender way to reveal the life growing inside her. At 26, Aaliyah still couldn't believe her luck. She had fallen in love with Ethan Cole, a man whose polished Harvard-educated charm had seemed too good to be true. When they met at a charity auction 4 years ago, she had been a community college student working as a caterer's assistant, quietly hoping someone would see her worth. And Ethan had. From expensive restaurants to weekend trips to his family's lake house, their whirlwind romance had felt like a fairy tale. Until tonight. The sound of a key turning in the lock made Aaliyah's chest tighten with anticipation. She tucked the pregnancy test behind her back, savoring the moment before revealing her secret. "Ethan, honey," she called out, her voice trembling with excitement. "I have the most incredible news to share with you." The man who walked through the door was not the husband she had imagined sharing this moment with. Ethan's tailored Italian suit was soaked from the October rain, but it wasn't the dampness that made her heart stop. It was the cold, unfamiliar glint in his gray eyes, sharp and cutting, a frost she had never seen before. "Pack your things, Aaliyah," he said flatly, his voice stripping the warmth from the room. "I want you out by tomorrow morning." The pregnancy test slipped from Aaliyah's fingers and clattered onto the hardwood floor, the sound echoing like a cruel drumbeat in the sudden, deafening silence. "What did you just say?" she whispered, barely able to process the words. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he moved with deliberate precision toward their bedroom, loosening the burgundy silk tie she had given him on their second anniversary. He didn't glance down at the fallen test. "You heard me perfectly, Aaliyah," he said, turning just long enough to let the cruelty in his words sink in. "This charade is over. I'm done pretending, and I'm done with you." Her legs felt weak, the romantic dinner, the candles, the rose petals, everything now seemed like a cruel joke designed to mock her. "Ethan, please," she whispered, stepping toward him. "There's something important I need to tell you." "Nothing you could possibly say matters anymore," he interrupted, shrugging past her. His shoulder collided with hers, and she stumbled slightly, heart breaking with every deliberate movement of his. "I found someone who actually deserves to be with a successful man like me. Someone who isn't." He paused at the bedroom doorway, turning to deliver his cutting finale. "Someone who isn't beneath me." Aaliyah pressed her hand to her chest, struggling to breathe as if his words had physically knocked the air from her lungs. "Beneath you?" she asked, voice trembling. "Ethan, we're married. We took vows in front of our families. We promised to love each other through everything." He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that seemed to slice through her heart. "Vows to you? I was young and foolish. I thought maybe I could clean you up, teach you to act around important people. But you can't polish trash, Aaliyah. Can you?" Tears streamed down her face as she sank onto the king-sized bed, the bed where they had made love just 3 nights ago, where he had whispered promises about their future. "This isn't you, Ethan. This isn't the man I fell in love with." Ethan spun around, eyes cold and unyielding. "Do you want to know what's cruel? Being trapped with someone who will never be good enough. Pretending you belong in my world while everyone at my office whispers about how you're out of place." Summoning every ounce of courage left in her, Aaliyah picked up the pregnancy test from the floor, shaking as she held it in front of him. "I'm pregnant, Ethan. We're going to have a baby." For one brief, desperate moment, she thought she saw something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps even a shadow of the man she had married. But the hope she felt evaporated instantly. "Not my problem," he said, voice colder than ice. "What do you mean, not your problem? This is your child. Our child. My child." She cried, clutching the test like a lifeline. He laughed, a cruel, cutting sound. "I doubt it's even mine. You probably got knocked up by some guy from your old neighborhood and now you're trying to pin it on me. Aaliyah stared at him, numb. The man before her, the one wearing her husband's face, was a stranger. Every word, every glance, every motion was designed to wound. She doubled over, hand instinctively shielding her still flat belly. "Please," she whispered through trembling lips. "Please don't do this. We can work through this. I love you so much." Ethan ignored her pleas, zipping his expensive suitcases with violent precision. "My lawyer will be in touch about the divorce. Don't even think about contacting me. Don't ask for money. Don't ask for anything. You're nothing to me now, Aaliyah. You always were nothing and you always will be nothing." The door slammed behind him, sending a wedding photo crashing to the floor. Glass shattered, rose petals scattered across the hardwood, and the test lay untouched. Aaliyah sank beside the remnants of her dreams, sobs racking her body, her chest aching not just with heartbreak but with disbelief. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, the October rain hammering against the windows. The flickering candlelight seemed to mock her, a reminder of the love and life she thought she had. But in that moment, holding the test and looking at the broken photo, Aaliyah felt the first spark of something new. Something quiet but insistent. She did not know yet that this devastation would become the foundation of her transformation, that she would rise from this darkness stronger than anyone could imagine. Clutching the pregnancy test to her chest, Aaliyah whispered into the silence of the empty penthouse. "You can leave, Ethan. But I won't. I may be alone, but I will fight for this baby. I will fight for me. And someday you will see what you threw away." The rain continued to fall, thunder rumbling in the distance. But inside Aaliyah, despite the despair, a tiny, fragile ember of hope had been lit. A spark that would soon grow into a blaze, one that would change everything, for her child, and for the life she was about to claim for herself. 4 months had passed since Ethan Cole had walked out of Aaliyah Brooks' life, leaving a trail of devastation that stretched further than she could have imagined. The penthouse they had shared, once filled with laughter and love, now existed only in memory. Aaliyah had traded marble floors for cracked linoleum, chandeliers for a single flickering bulb, and the warmth of Ethan's embrace for the cold emptiness of a tiny studio apartment. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Dark circles framed her once bright eyes, a permanent testament to sleepless nights spent working, worrying, and crying. Her maternity clothes hung loosely on her frame, evidence not of comfort but of how little she had to eat. Pregnancy had been cruel, she had lost weight because food had become a luxury. And yet, there was a quiet determination in her gaze, a stubborn spark that refused to be extinguished. Her home, if it could even be called that, was nothing more than a single room serving as bedroom, kitchen, and living area. A card table doubled as her dining area, a hot plate sat on top, and her bed was a second-hand mattress she had purchased for $40. Every item in the room reminded her of how far she had fallen. Aaliyah pressed a hand to her growing belly, feeling the baby stir within. "I'm sorry, little one," she whispered, voice trembling. "I know this isn't the life I promised you, but I'll do better. I'll find a way." Work was relentless. 3 jobs consumed her waking hours. Cleaning offices from midnight to 6, waitressing at a nearby diner during the day, and doing alterations for a seamstress in the evenings. She barely had time to eat, let alone sleep. Every paycheck was swallowed by rent, bills, and the occasional grocery run. The landlord, Mrs. Patterson, was relentless. 4 days late on rent, and the old woman's voice rang harshly through the thin door. "Mrs. Brooks," she barked. "I know you're in there. Rent's due. You said you'd pay last month. What's different this time?" "I'll have it by Friday," Aaliyah replied, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "I promise. I'm working extra shifts." Mrs. Patterson's eyes narrowed, sweeping over Aaliyah's obviously pregnant form. "You better think twice before getting yourself knocked up by some man who won't stick around." The words stung, painfully close to the truth, and Aaliyah sank onto her mattress afterward, burying her face in her hands. Her sister, Elena, had tried to help, sending the little money she could spare from her job as a hotel housekeeper. But Elena had 3 children of her own and barely enough to cover her family's needs. Their mother had already given her entire savings. Still, Aaliyah's stomach growled. The skipped breakfasts and cheap meals of rice and beans were not enough to sustain her growing body. 2 months later, the consequences of poverty and exhaustion struck with brutal immediacy. Aaliyah had been scrubbing the polished floors of the Meridian office complex on the 20th floor when the first contraction hit her. It tore through her like a bolt of lightning, leaving her gasping and clutching her belly. "No, not now," she whispered, panic rising. She was only 34 weeks along. The baby, or babies, as a sudden, inexplicable fear crept into her mind, were not supposed to come for another month and a half. With trembling hands, she managed to dial her sister on the office phone. "Elena, something's wrong. The baby's coming and I'm at work." Her voice shook with terror. "Stay right there, Mika." Elena's voice cut sharply through the line, fierce with protective love. "I'm calling an ambulance. Don't move." By the time the paramedics arrived, Aaliyah was collapsed in the hallway outside the executive washroom, sweat mixing with tears, clutching her belly through waves of agonizing contractions. "Ma'am, how far along are you?" the EMT asked as they lifted her onto the gurney. 34 weeks, she gasped. "But I think there might be 2 babies." The ride to County General Hospital blurred in a haze of sirens, pain, and fear. Elena met them at the emergency room, her face pale with worry but radiating unshakable determination. "The babies." Aaliyah cried, reaching for her sister's hand. "What if something's wrong? What if they're not okay?" "They're going to be fine," Elena said firmly, though Aaliyah could see the worry in her eyes. "You're going to be fine. We'll get through this." The emergency room was chaos. Gunshot victims, overdoses, and families crying in languages Aaliyah didn't recognize filled the hallways. Nurses moved with practiced speed, and it took Elena arguing with 3 different staff members before they finally wheeled Aaliyah into a delivery room. "Twins," confirmed Dr. Williams, a tired-looking resident not much older than Aaliyah herself. "They're coming whether we're ready or not. Are you prepared to be a mother of 2? Prepared?" The absurdity of the question made her want to laugh, then cry. She had no insurance, no savings, no nursery, no help from a husband who had abandoned her. She had nothing except a fierce, unyielding love for the babies who were about to arrive. And arrive they did. 14 hours later, at 3:47 a.m. on a frigid February morning, the first baby emerged screaming with the raw vitality of life itself. Aaliyah barely had time to breathe before the second followed, quieter but equally determined. "They're beautiful, Mika," Elena whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Look at them. They're perfect." Aaliyah held them both for the first time, one in each arm, and felt a deep, resonant shift inside her chest. Daniel, the firstborn, had Ethan's strong jaw and commanding presence even as a newborn. Jordan, the second, bore Aaliyah's gentler features, with a quiet but unmistakable strength in his tiny grip. "I'm sorry," Aaliyah whispered to them as they slept in her arms. "I'm sorry I can't give you everything you deserve right now. But I promise I will never give up. I will never stop fighting for you. You deserve so much more than this. And somehow, some way we will make it." Elena squeezed her shoulder gently. "And what about Ethan? He should know these are his sons." Aaliyah's gaze hardened as she looked down at her sleeping babies. "He made his choice when he walked away. These boys don't need a father who sees them as burdens instead of blessings." Even with nothing, no money, no husband, no support system beyond a sister who was stretched thin, Aaliyah felt something Ethan could never understand. She had love. She had determination. And most importantly, she had her sons. The first weeks were brutal. Caring for twins in a cramped studio apartment with no help was an exercise in endurance beyond anything Aaliyah had imagined. The babies cried in shifts, ensuring she never slept more than an hour at a time. She moved with them strapped to her chest in second-hand carriers, balancing work and motherhood with the delicate precision of a tightrope walker. One night, after both boys had cried for 3 straight hours and Aaliyah had been awake for 36, she found herself sobbing alongside them. She sat on the floor, back against the wall, Daniel in one arm and Jordan in the other, wondering if she was strong enough for this impossible task. Then she looked down at Daniel, who had stopped crying and was staring up at her with dark, serious eyes that seemed too old for a newborn. Something in that gaze communicated directly to her heart. "We are counting on you, Mama. Don't give up on us." Aaliyah's tears fell freely, but this time they were not tears of despair. "You're right," she whispered to him, then to Jordan, who mirrored his brother's intensity with Ethan's piercing eyes. "You're both right. I can't fall apart. You are the best things that ever happened to me. And we will get through this. We don't need anybody else." By the time the boys settled into their makeshift crib, Aaliyah felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. She had nothing, yet she had everything that truly mattered: her children and the love that would sustain her. As dawn's early light filtered through the threadbare curtains of the studio, Aaliyah sat in the old recliner Elena had found for her, exhausted but resolute. She did not know how she would rebuild her life, how she would provide for her boys, or how she would survive without Ethan. But one thing was certain: she would fight and she would win. Somewhere out there, Ethan Cole may have been living his perfect life. But Aaliyah Brooks, mother, fighter, survivor, had begun the journey of reclaiming her story. And this time she would not let anyone, not even the man who had shattered her world, define her worth. The first rays of dawn streamed through the cracked blinds of Aaliyah Brooks' tiny studio apartment, glinting off the scattered toys, blankets and laundry that covered nearly every inch of the room. It was chaos, a battlefield that reflected the life she had been forced to endure since Ethan Cole had walked out. But unlike the darkness of the past months, today brought a faint glimmer of determination. Aaliyah, though exhausted, was alive, and more importantly her twins, Daniel and Jordan, were alive. Motherhood had pushed her beyond limits she didn't know existed. She had endured sleepless nights, pain, hunger and fear, yet each morning she rose, her body aching, her spirit tired, and yet her heart fiercely protective. Daniel and Jordan, only weeks old, were already the center of her universe. Their cries dictated her schedule, their smiles fueled her hope, and their tiny hands clasping hers reminded her of the stakes. The first few weeks at home had been brutal. There was no nursery, no rocking chair, no designer baby gear. Only a thin mattress on the floor, a hand-me-down crib Elena had scoured from a yard sale, and second-hand carriers that barely fit the twins. She fed them in shifts, changed them in shifts, and slept in shifts, often not more than an hour at a time. Food was meager, sometimes a hastily reheated can of beans, sometimes nothing at all. And yet, every sacrifice reinforced her determination. She could not, would not, let her children feel the weight of despair she carried in her heart. One particularly brutal night, both boys had cried for hours on end. Aaliyah, perched on the edge of the mattress, swayed slightly with the twins in her arms, her body trembling with exhaustion. Her vision blurred from tears she refused to fully shed until the boys were safe. She whispered to them over and over, "I am here. I will never leave you. I promise, I promise." Daniel's small fingers found hers, curling tightly around her hand as if he understood. Jordan's eyes, wide and curious even in the dim light, seemed to study her face with the intensity of someone older than his weeks of life. Aaliyah laughed softly through her tears. "You're right, my loves. We can do this. We can survive anything." The days that followed required more than love. They required ingenuity. Without savings or support, Aaliyah began to rebuild her life piece by piece. She returned to work cleaning offices during the overnight shift, but she refused to exhaust herself entirely. She learned the art of time management quickly, feeding the boys while folding laundry, rocking them while preparing meals, and carrying them strapped to her chest while walking to the diner for her lunch shift. Evenings were often spent learning new skills. Elena had given her a sewing machine, and with guidance from tutorials, Aaliyah began doing alterations for a local seamstress. The work was slow and painstaking, but every dollar earned went directly to feeding her sons or paying rent. It wasn't glamorous and it certainly wasn't easy, but it was progress. And with each small success, a spark of pride began to replace the despair that had threatened to consume her. She learned how to balance bills, how to stretch grocery dollars, how to manage sleep in increments so small they would seem impossible to anyone else. But the most important lesson came from her children. Every day, Daniel and Jordan reminded her of resilience. Daniel had a commanding presence even as a newborn. His strong jaw and intense eyes mirrored Ethan's, a cruel reminder of the man who had abandoned them. Jordan, quieter yet observant, bore Aaliyah's gentleness but displayed a courage in his tiny grips that astonished her. Together, they were her reason for waking, for pushing, for dreaming of a life beyond survival. By the time the twins were 6 months old, Aaliyah had achieved a small but vital milestone. She had secured a part-time remote job transcribing documents, a modest but stable income that allowed her to cut back on cleaning offices overnight. She still worked hard at the diner and with sewing, but now she had time to engage with her sons in ways she hadn't been able to before. Reading stories, singing lullabies, and laughing at the little things that made motherhood both exhausting and miraculous. Her world was still far from perfect. She was still behind on bills, still living paycheck to paycheck, and still carrying the weight of a husband's betrayal that seemed to echo in the walls around her. But she had learned something vital. She could survive, she could thrive, and she could love fiercely without needing anyone else's validation. One rainy afternoon, as she walked home from the diner with the twins strapped securely to her in carriers, she paused at the corner store and looked up at the gray sky. The city seemed relentless, uncaring, and sometimes cruel. But she thought of Daniel and Jordan, their tiny hands gripping hers, their warm breaths against her chest, and she felt a quiet but undeniable sense of purpose. "I won't let anything break us," she whispered, glancing down at their faces. "We're going to rise, my loves. You'll see." The journey was far from over. There would be days when she would cry in the middle of the night, exhausted and unsure if she could continue. There would be moments when she would wonder if the sacrifices were enough. But each challenge reinforced her inner strength, teaching her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was the determination to move forward despite it. Aaliyah's transformation wasn't immediate. There were setbacks, missed payments, sleepless nights, and moments of crushing loneliness. But she clung to the belief that life could be better, that she and her sons deserved more than survival. They deserved joy, stability, and love. And slowly, painstakingly, she began to create that life. She enrolled the twins in a small community childcare program part-time, freeing her to work more efficiently. She discovered a passion for creating handcrafted items. Small, elegant pieces she sold online, each sale adding a little security to their lives. She began keeping a journal, documenting every challenge and every victory, both as a record of her resilience and as a testament to the life she was building. Evenings became sacred. After the boys were bathed and fed, Aaliyah would sit in the soft glow of the single lamp, holding their hands, imagining a future beyond poverty, beyond betrayal, beyond survival. She pictured a life where Daniel and Jordan could play freely, learn freely, and grow with dignity. And in those quiet moments, a thought began to form, a vision that would define the next chapter of her life. She would not only survive, she would thrive. She would not simply exist, she would become the woman she had been meant to be. And she would do it with her sons by her side, stronger together than any obstacle the world could throw at them. It was during one of these quiet nights that she allowed herself to remember Ethan. She remembered his cold words, the contempt in his eyes, and the ease with which he had abandoned her. But instead of hatred, Aaliyah felt clarity. He had made his choice. He had walked away from the life they could have shared. And that, she realized, was his loss, not hers. Her sons, her purpose, her determination. These were treasures no one could take from her. And someday perhaps the world would see just how far she had come. Aaliyah Brooks, once shattered, was rising from the ashes. Each day, each decision, each act of courage added a brick to the foundation of the life she was building. The mother of twins, abandoned and alone, was no longer a victim. She was a fighter. She was a survivor. And she was unstoppable. As she lay Daniel and Jordan down in their crib that night, she kissed each forehead gently, whispering the promise that had become her mantra. We will rise. We will thrive. And nothing, no person, no hardship, no betrayal, will ever take that from us. Outside, the city hummed with indifference. But inside Aaliyah Brooks' apartment, a quiet revolution had begun. A mother, a fighter, a survivor, and her sons, her reason, her heart, were ready to face the world together. The grand ballroom of the luxury hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers, each light reflecting off polished marble floors and gilded decorations. Guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos mingled, laughter and champagne flutes creating a veneer of perfection. Everything was poised for a celebration, a union between Ethan Cole and his new fiancée, a carefully curated life that, to anyone observing, appeared flawless. Aaliyah Brooks, however, had no interest in the pomp and circumstance. She wasn't here to witness beauty or luxury. She wasn't here to be intimidated by wealth or power. She was here for justice. And she was armed with the most powerful truth Ethan could never escape: their children. 3 years of betrayal, struggle, sleepless nights, and unrelenting determination had led her to this moment. Her twins, Daniel and Jordan, were now 4 years old, healthy, clever, and vibrant, a testament to her perseverance. Today she would remind Ethan Cole exactly what he had thrown away. Dressed in a simple yet elegant dress, Aaliyah held the hands of her sons as they walked through the entrance. Their presence alone caused a ripple through the crowd, a mixture of surprise and curiosity. The twins' striking resemblance to both parents, Daniel with Ethan's sharp jawline and commanding gaze, Jordan with Aaliyah's warmth and gentleness, made it impossible for anyone to look away. Ethan, standing at the altar with a flawless suit and a smug smile, froze mid-conversation when he saw them. His eyes widened, the color draining from his face. Time seemed to stretch as Aaliyah moved forward, each step measured, deliberate, unstoppable. She felt a mixture of calm and exhilaration, the quiet strength of a woman who had endured more than anyone could imagine. "Ethan," she called out, her voice carrying across the ballroom, steady and unflinching. Every head turned, whispers spreading like wildfire. "We need to talk." The room fell silent. Cameras clicked, guests gasped, and Ethan's bride-to-be looked bewildered, unsure how to react. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole faced the consequences of his actions. What are you doing here?" Ethan's voice was a mixture of disbelief and panic. "I'm here," Aaliyah said, eyes locked on his, "to show you exactly what you walked away from." She knelt slightly to lift the twins in her arms. "Daniel, Jordan, say hello to your father." The boys, understanding the gravity of the moment despite their young age, waved shyly. Daniel's eyes, dark and commanding like Ethan's, met his father's with unflinching honesty. Jordan, smaller but equally perceptive, offered a gentle smile, echoing Aaliyah's warmth. Ethan's mouth opened, then closed, words failing him. The guests murmured, the atmosphere thick with tension and disbelief. Aaliyah stood tall, holding her sons close, radiating the strength she had cultivated over years of hardship. "You see him, Ethan?" Aaliyah continued, her voice firm, unwavering. "These are your sons. The children you abandoned, thinking they would be nothing without you. You walked away from your family, your responsibility, and your vows. And yet, here we are, thriving, living, and proving that love does not need you to survive." Daniel's small hand reached out, gently touching Ethan's cheek. The gesture, innocent and pure, contrasted sharply with the coldness Ethan had shown years ago. Ethan's face paled further, the realization settling in. No amount of wealth, no luxury, no curated life could undo the fact that he had missed the foundation of true love and family. "This," Aaliyah said, her voice rising slightly, commanding attention, "is what you left behind. And not even your new life, your new fiancé, or your possessions can replace this." She gestured toward her sons, whose tiny eyes now held the quiet power of truth. "We are not nothing. We are everything. And we are here to remind you of it." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some guests murmured at the resemblance, some at the courage Aaliyah radiated, but all understood the gravity of the scene unfolding before them. Ethan's bride-to-be took a step back, visibly shaken, while Ethan himself seemed frozen, a man confronted by his own mistakes in the most public way imaginable. You can't do this here," he stammered, panic creeping into his tone. "This isn't the place." "No, Ethan," Aaliyah interrupted, voice unwavering, "this is exactly the place. You chose to walk away, to abandon us. And now, you get to see the life you tried to erase with your cruelty. These boys," she said, lifting Daniel and Jordan slightly higher, "are proof that love is stronger than selfishness. That resilience is stronger than betrayal. That I am stronger than you ever imagined." Tears welled in her eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of victory, of triumph over adversity. Every sleepless night, every meager meal, every tear shed in the quiet of her studio apartment had led her to this moment. She had turned heartbreak into strength, despair into determination, and Ethan's cruelty into fuel for her success. The guests, once focused on the luxury and romance of the wedding, now shifted their attention entirely. Cameras from the hotel staff captured every moment, creating a record that would linger in memory. Aaliyah's words, her presence, and her children's undeniable reality created a tableau of justice and triumph. Ethan, finally finding his voice, took a step forward. "Aaliyah, His words faltered, his arrogance stripped away by the undeniable truth standing before him. "I have nothing to say to you," Aaliyah interrupted, calm but firm. "Your words, your choices, and your abandonment speak for themselves. I don't need your apology. I don't need your recognition. What I need is to show the world, and most importantly these boys, that we are complete without you." Daniel and Jordan, sensing the gravity of their mother's stance, clung to her hands tightly. Aaliyah smiled softly at them. "You see, my loves, we have everything we need. Love, courage, and each other. That's enough to create a life far richer than anything money can buy." Ethan's face turned red with a mixture of anger, shame, and disbelief. For the first time in his life he was powerless. No suit, no wealth, no charm could erase the truth. He had lost his family to his own selfishness. Aaliyah turned slightly to face the audience, her voice rising with quiet authority. "Let this be a lesson, for everyone here and for anyone watching our story in the future. Love is not defined by wealth, by status, or by perfection. Love is defined by sacrifice, resilience, and the courage to keep going when the world tries to break you. We are proof of that." The crowd erupted into applause, a mixture of admiration, astonishment, and respect. The twins giggled, sensing the joy around them, and Aaliyah's heart swelled. This was more than vindication. It was a celebration of life, love, and survival. Ethan stood frozen, unable to respond, powerless in the face of the truth. His meticulously planned life, his luxury, and his new fiancée could not compete with the bond between a mother and her children, a bond he had foolishly abandoned. Aaliyah knelt to pick up the twins, holding them close. She whispered softly, "We did it, my loves. We are free. And we are unstoppable." As she walked out of the grand ballroom, Daniel and Jordan in her arms, the world seemed to shift. Aaliyah Brooks, once a woman shattered by betrayal, had reclaimed her life. She had transformed heartbreak into triumph, despair into determination, and abandonment into proof of her strength. Outside, the city lights sparkled, indifferent yet beautiful. And for the first time in years, Aaliyah allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel the weight of victory, and to know without a doubt that she had won. Not through revenge, not through anger, but through the quiet, unwavering power of love and resilience. Ethan Cole could watch, stunned and powerless, as the family he had abandoned walked into the night together. Aaliyah, Daniel, and Jordan were no longer defined by his absence. They were defined by their courage, their love, and the unbreakable bond they had built, a bond that no betrayal could ever destroy. And in that moment, Aaliyah knew that the life ahead, though still challenging, would be filled with hope, joy, and the undeniable truth that they were unstoppable together. 2 years had passed since Aaliyah Brooks walked into that grand ballroom, holding Daniel and Jordan in her arms, and showed Ethan Cole the family he had abandoned. The memories of that night, the shock in his eyes, and the undeniable truth she had revealed still lingered in her mind, but they no longer haunted her. Instead, they had become a reminder of how far she and her sons had come, a testament to her strength, resilience, and unwavering love. Her life had transformed in ways she had only dreamed of during the darkest months after Ethan left. The studio apartment where she had struggled to survive was long gone, replaced by a modest but warm home in a safe neighborhood. She had decorated it with soft colors, framed photographs, and carefully crafted mementos of her son's childhood. Every corner reflected her love, her hard work, and her triumph over the hardships that had once seemed insurmountable. Daniel and Jordan had grown into bright, curious, and confident children. Daniel, now 6, carried the same sharp intensity in his gaze that had startled Ethan at the wedding, but it was tempered with compassion and a love for his younger brother. Jordan, ever gentle and observant, mirrored Aaliyah's warmth and patience, often offering quiet reassurance to his brother or mother when things became overwhelming. Together, they were inseparable, a team bound not just by blood but by shared experiences and unshakable love. Aaliyah herself had blossomed into the woman she had always known she could be. She had expanded her small online craft business into a thriving boutique, combining her love for sewing with a talent for design. Her reputation for quality, creativity, and integrity had grown, and she now employed a few local women, helping them achieve independence just as she had. More importantly, Aaliyah had found peace within herself. She no longer carried the weight of betrayal as a burden. It had been transformed into a source of wisdom and inner strength. She had learned that happiness didn't come from wealth or validation from others. It came from living authentically, loving fiercely, and creating a life filled with meaning. On a crisp Saturday morning, Aaliyah watched from the kitchen as Daniel and Jordan played in the backyard, their laughter ringing through the air like music. She leaned against the counter, sipping coffee and smiling softly, remembering the sleepless nights, the hunger, the fear. The struggles had been real, but they had also forged her into the mother and woman she had become. Elena, still a constant presence in their lives, had helped in countless ways, but the responsibility and triumph were Aaliyah's. She had learned to navigate life's obstacles alone, but never without love. And now, seeing her sons running freely, chasing a ball, giggling and shouting with joy, she realized that they had all survived and flourished. A knock at the door pulled her from her reverie. She opened it to find a small delivery box, a gift from a local artisan she had recently partnered with. As she held it, she noticed a note inside. For the mother who proves every day that love, courage, and resilience are the greatest gifts we can give the world. Aaliyah's lips curved into a gentle smile, her heart swelling. She looked out at her sons again, running hand in hand, and whispered softly, "We did it, my loves. We made it. Together." Later that evening, as she tucked Daniel and Jordan into bed, she traced their tiny faces with her fingers, marveling at how much they had grown. "I promise you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I will always protect you, love you, and guide you. You are my greatest achievement, and nothing, not even the pain of the past, can ever take that away from us." Once the boys were asleep, Aaliyah sat by the window watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. She thought of Ethan Cole, imagining the life he had chosen for himself, and felt no bitterness. There was nothing left to prove, no unfinished business. She had already won in the most important way. She had created a life filled with love, laughter, and hope. As the night deepened, Aaliyah whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. She thanked the universe for strength, for resilience, for the unexpected joys that had emerged from the hardships. She thanked her sons for teaching her the true meaning of love. And she thanked herself for refusing to give up, for fighting when everything seemed lost, and for believing in a future brighter than the shadows of the past. The epilogue of their story wasn't defined by betrayal, heartbreak, or lost opportunities. It was defined by courage, by unwavering love, and by the remarkable bond between a mother and her children. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, Aaliyah Brooks knew without doubt that they had everything they had ever needed: each other, hope, and the promise of countless new beginnings. The world outside continued, relentless and ever-changing, but inside their home, there was warmth, laughter, and unshakable love. Aaliyah turned off the light, closed her eyes, and let herself finally rest. She had survived the storm, and now she and her sons were free to soar. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, of course, but Aaliyah welcomed them because she knew this truth above all else: they were a family. They were unstoppable. And the best was yet to come.